with retired Naval Intelligence Officer Hal Kempfer. Before that, follow the latest updates on the war in the Middle East with Yesha Hasnain from Fox.
I think NATO is being very foolish. It was a big test. We don't need them, but they should have been there.
President Trump criticized NATO while receiving the Prime Minister. Oval Office today, where at one point he defended the British Prime Minister.
Keir Starmer is not Winston Churchill.
Keir Starmer has significantly reshaped Ireland-United Kingdom relations, but I believe he is a very sincere and serious person, someone I think you can get along with.
The White House faces internal opposition to attacks against Iran. Today, the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent, resigned, claiming that Iran did not pose an imminent threat to our country. That Trump yielded to Israeli pressure? Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt responded, stating that the president had strong and compelling evidence that Iran was planning to attack the U.S. first.
I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security.
Two sources within the government confirmed to Fox News that Kent did not attend the meetings about Iran. The Democrats claim that the Trump administration doesn't have a plan for victory.
It seems like they're always just a few hours away from hanging up another mission accomplished sign around here, and we keep on suffering.
Trump's trip to China was postponed because of the conflict, while the administration tries to reassure Americans, admitting that the longer this lasts, the more it will hurt consumers.
If this were prolonged, it wouldn't really hurt the U.S. economy much. It would hurt the consumer. But that's the least of our concerns, because we're very confident that we're ahead of schedule.
Also today, President Trump again called on the Senate to pass the Save America Act, threatening Republicans that if they don't vote in favor, they won't receive his endorsement. The Senate is now officially debating this bill, which could last from several hours to several days. At the White House, I'm Yesha Hasnain, Fox News.
Meanwhile, the U.S. reported that they are using 2.5-ton bunker buster bombs. In Iran, CENTCOM stated hours ago that U.S. forces used 2.5-ton bunker buster bombs in fortified Iranian missile sites on the coast near the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian anti-ship cruise missiles at those locations, according to them, posed a risk to navigation in the strait. Former Naval Intelligence Officer, analyst, and host of the Strait podcast, Hal Kempfer, is with us today. Deep penetrating 2.5-ton munitions, we've used those before?
Not that I know of. I think this is the first time this model has been used. We've already used some pretty advanced deep penetration munitions. But this one is, as they're saying, this one in particular is one we've never used before. So I have to take their word for it, although it looks similar to some other things we've used before. But one thing they've been doing, certainly in the last, 5-7 years, there's been a lot of research and development into some of these unique types of munitions, which can destroy these deep underground bunkers, facilities, tunnels. You know, they've built, looking specifically at Iran, but also at other places like North Korea and other places around the world. We're seeing more and more situations where they bury their sites, where they store drones, ballistic missiles, and everything else. They specifically said that this hit a tunnel with a lot of cruise missiles, an anti-ship one right on the coast. It seems like it was a very good application. One thing to mention is that we're seeing heavy bombers coming in with B-1Bs flying over Iran. The B-52s are in the region. I'm not exactly sure what they're hitting. However, eliminating the air defenses along the coast, which is what we're doing, allows those larger bombers, which can carry more than a B-2, to operate. They can also be positioned further forward, allowing for more sorties per day, bringing in that heavy weaponry to neutralize underground facilities, wearing down their anti-ship capabilities in the Strait of Hormuz faster.
Hal, just before you came in here, we heard about an attack that happened in Ramat Gan. That's in the center of Israel. The camera is going up. The upper part of a building seems to have been damaged by this attack just moments ago. We were looking at this camera and they were assessing the conditions on the ground. There was definitely an attack that seems to have hit the Tel Aviv area. I'm wondering if we can put Trey Yingst's post on the screen, Hal. Trey is saying that there were 2 people killed in central Israel. Hal, during the latest Iranian missile attack, with cluster munitions falling on Tel Aviv and surrounding areas. A reminder how that they have a pretty robust missile defense system in Israel. But every now and then we see something manage to get through.
One of the things we've seen is that the Iranians have been putting cluster bomb warheads on their ballistic missiles. That's a bit different from what we saw last June. That's a change. And what happens is that when they arrive, whether the Iron Dome or David's Sling or any other air defense system hits that missile, if it hits the target and it's directly over a specific area, instead of destroying a single warhead with a large and powerful single explosive, it fragments. Sometimes it breaks apart before being destroyed. Spreading these cluster munitions, this has become a more difficult problem to deal with in air defense. It's a big issue. Obviously, many countries around the world consider cluster munitions illegal under international laws of war, but not all countries think that way. We use them, and that's how it works. It's a very devastating way to cause a lot of damage. But the truth is, for Iran, it seems to be something they are willing to use. And for Israel, this is causing a lot of air defense problems as they try to prevent it from causing destruction when they destroy the ballistic missile itself.
Let's talk about Joe Kent. Of course, a lot of people have been talking about Kent. Today we had a little audio interruption. I need to ask you, since he is the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, do you know a thing or two about counterterrorism? Kent resigned. He announced it today due to concerns about the justification for the war in Iran. He said he cannot in good conscience support the Trump administration's fight. In a post, he said that Iran did not pose an immediate, imminent threat to our nation. And he stated, "It is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby." Again, he heads the National Counterterrorism Center, the agency responsible for analyzing and detecting terrorist threats. The main reason he wrote in his letter is that he feels Iran did not pose an imminent threat to the United States. How can we understand this issue? Tonight, Raul, did Iran pose an imminent threat?
Iran has always posed an imminent threat to the U.S. They have agents and sleeper cells in the U.S., as well as a global network of proxies. Hezbollah has agents and sleeper cells in the Zoai. They sponsor the Houthis, who have carried out anti-ship attacks in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the Red Sea, and the Gulf of Aden in recent years. And then you have all the Iraqi Shia militias, which have posed a threat. So I, heard what he said. I couldn't really understand his reasoning about it. Maybe he thought that since Iran doesn't have an intercontinental missile that can reach U.S., and since they haven't built a nuclear warhead yet, they didn't exactly pose an imminent threat. Or maybe, since they haven't carried out a major attack on the U.S. for the country yet, he thinks they still don't pose a real danger. I'm really not quite sure where that idea comes from, but I'll say this. I found Joe Kent a very strange choice for the NCTC. He has some very, very strange ideas. When you look at what he said in his resignation, where he pointed the finger at Israel, and basically, in other words, he tried to blame what he perceives as a Jewish lobby or something like that, a Jewish influence or something like that. You didn't have to dig very deep to find an ingrained anti-Semitism in his decision there. And I think what really bothered him was that the U.S. was, fully involved in fighting, a coalition war with Israel. That bothered him from his political and ideological point of view.
After all, someone leaving that position harms the Counterterrorism Center in the fight against terrorism.
As a retired intelligence officer, I'm a bit biased, but I'll say this. I don't think Joe Kent leaving that position slows them down. Actually, I'm sure that his replacement will do a job just as good or even better than he did.
Let's talk about some of the important advances the U.S. has made in the war. Recently, U.S. CENTCOM just moments ago posted a short video on social media. Let's watch it real quick.
We remain focused on our military objectives. These objectives are well defined and include eliminating Iran's ballistic missiles, drones, and naval threats. So far, our Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps aviators have collectively carried out more than 6,000 combat flights. demonstrating the unmatched capability of the American Joint Force. As we maintain air superiority over Iranian skies, and to the entire Operation Epicure team, keep moving forward, stand firm, fight to win. Thank you, and may God be with you.
This was published just moments ago on the official U.S. CENTCOM profile on social media. We also heard that 2 main Iranian leaders were killed in attacks in the last 24 hours. This includes Ali Laranjani, seen as the country's commander, and General Golan Reza Soleimani, who, according to AP, led the internal security force that suppressed waves of mass protests. How significant are the deaths of these 2 in the overall context? What's your opinion on that?
I think it's very significant. Both of them seem to be, in a way, what they call a classic Israeli decapitation strike. We call it classic because we've seen some of the remarkable things in previous strikes, especially, with Hezbollah in Lebanon, by eliminating Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the group. So they carried out impressive strikes with extremely time-sensitive intelligence, putting aircraft on a mission or launching missiles on a mission very quickly, and that's what they did in this case. Now, the thing with Laranjani was that he was some called him the decision maker, right? With emphasis on the. He was widely seen as basically the guy who made the decisions regarding what was really going on. It didn't really feel like Mojtaba Khamenei, and we don't know what his situation is. We haven't seen or heard from him since he took on this, or I should say was appointed the supreme leader. But it kind of felt like Laranjani was actually basically the one running things. He has a lot of connections and close contact with the Revolutionary Guard's leadership. This decapitation strike eliminated the main decision maker who was running the regime at that very moment. This is very significant. He has been there for a long time. So, he's not someone who can be easily replaced. He's widely recognized. So again, in terms of the regime's credibility, he's not someone who can be easily replaced. And then you have Gholam Reza Soleimani, who is the head of the Basij. The Basij is that really large pseudo-volunteer militia organization, I think with about 350,000 members. These are the extremists, ideologically aligned with the regime. I hate to call them law enforcement. That gives them too much credit. But this element of repression was so intertwined with the horrific deaths of protesters in December and January all across Iran. And it was also there for a long time, so I think both of these attacks were quite significant.
It's because a guy mentioned that. Can you explain in detail why a guy like Laranjani would be making the decisions when there's a new supreme leader? And also, President Masoud Pezeshkian, why not choose these 2 candidates, and why choose someone like Laranjani?
We're not absolutely sure if Pezeshkian actually has real influence. You might remember that previously he apologized to the Gulf states and Arabs for the fact that they had hit their hotels and other positions. And literally, while he was making that apology, the Revolutionary Guard was launching more drones and missiles at the same states, doing exactly the same thing. This was seen as if he were a figurehead president who didn't make the decisions with someone else in charge. Why didn't we consider that it could have been Khamenei or Mojtaba, the new supreme leader? Again, we haven't heard from him. We didn't see him. The only thing we actually managed to observe was that a news anchor read several pages of script. A letter that was supposedly written by him, but we didn't hear him. There are reports that he was injured, maybe completely incapacitated, in the same attacks that killed his father. It would make sense for him to be there. I haven't seen anything saying he wasn't at the same location when those attacks happened. Everything from him having a serious cut on his face and injuries on his feet to possibly having lost a leg. He had serious internal injuries, organ injuries, and maybe in a coma. And I say these things, you might think, well, it sounds a bit conspiratorial. We don't know. That's the whole point. No one has heard anything. So, Laranjani was seen as the decision maker, the one who gave the orders and ran the country, leading the regime's response in the war. And now he's out of the picture. And others may rise to take his place, but they won't have the same weight, the same recognition, the same following that Laranjani had. So I think this will happen over time. I think it will be effective. We asked the same thing when Nasrallah was eliminated by the Israelis. Will this stop Hezbollah? And we found out that, yes, it did slow them down. Nasrallah had been there for a long time. By eliminating such a leader, it takes time for them to reorganize.
The time in Israel is about 2:40 in the morning, a live image of Tel Aviv. Benjamin Netanyahu sent this message today saying, "This morning we eliminated Ali Larijani. He leads the Revolutionary Guard, the gang that truly controls Iran. Along with him, we also eliminated the commander of the Basij and his henchmen who terrorized the streets of Tehran and other Iranian cities against the population. We are also operating there, operating by air, with Air Force planes and using drones." You know how it is? Let's bring things here to the United States and talk about what President Trump has been saying lately. President Trump said that his proposal to NATO and the United States allies to protect the Strait of Hormuz was widely rejected. Trump posted, "I'm not surprised by their actions, but I've always seen NATO, where we spend hundreds of billions a year protecting these countries, as a one-way street. We protect them, but they won't do anything for us, especially when we need it." How, for our allies, why doesn't it make strategic sense to get more involved in protecting the Strait?
Well, there are a few reasons for that. First, they've been getting a lot of verbal attacks, so to speak, from President Trump for some time now. He's already made some pretty strong statements. Denmark is going through tough times because of Greenland. As you know, there have been discussions about taking Greenland militarily. So was there any discussion about that? And frankly, President Trump has been very outspoken in his comments about other European leaders. I also thought he was a bit restrained when it came to Keir Starmer. But the issue with these countries is twofold. First, from a political standpoint, it's important to remember that they are all democracies. They don't want to be dragged into a war in the Middle East. The reality of their history is that, yes, they came to our aid. The only time NATO's Article 5 was invoked was to defend the United States after September 11th. And those countries sent support, troops to Iraq and Afghanistan and to other places around the world in the global war on terror. And I think that, for example, in the case of Denmark, they ended up suffering a high number of Danish military deaths per capita of any country in the world, more than us. So they took a stand, and of course they watched what happened in Afghanistan, how it all ended, and so on. That's why they are very reluctant to get involved. Another issue is that they have domestic constituencies from the Middle East who are Muslim and who have a very different opinion about what is happening with the war in Iran. And they are afraid that if they do that, and they've seen this happen in the past, when they get involved in these adventures or missions in the Middle East, they end up causing protests in the streets and other problems that arise. That's why they really hesitate to get involved with this issue as well.
Lastly, we heard from the Washington Post today. Israel believes that Iranian protesters would be massacred if they return to the streets because the Iranian regime is not giving in, and the Revolutionary Guard would defeat the protesters. Let's suppose that the US, the CIA, or Israel wanted to support the protesters. How could they do that?
Well, the thing is, if we support the protesters to prevent the siege and stop the Revolutionary Guard from taking to the streets, and at this moment, I think the Israeli authorities are correct in saying that the Basij and the Revolutionary Guard would not hesitate to literally massacre the protesters. And they kind of did that in December and January, and I think they would do even worse now, judging by what's going on in their minds. The protesters would be seen as traitors since they identify the regime as Iran itself, and because of that, they would be extremely brutal with anyone out there. The only way to fight this militarily would be if Israel and the USA. We are going to carry out very detailed and extremely time-sensitive tactical strikes against IRGC and Basij units in order to eliminate them and make them ineffective in combat. Before they even had contact with the protesters, there is a level of coordination in calling for air support, getting planes with the right armament at the exact moment, which is very difficult to accomplish but not impossible. Now we attack Revolutionary Guard positions and siege positions, destroying barracks and doing all these things. We can disable these two components of the regime before any protest occurs. And the hope is that when the protests take to the streets, these secular security forces will join them. This provides a certain level of protection, but there is still a way to go. I think we're weeks away from seeing that happen.
Hal is the host of the Strat podcast. I saw that you just released a podcast about the Strait of Hormuz. Listen to the Strat on any platform where you get your podcasts. Thank you, Hal, right?